Well, that mass incarceration is a myth.
I don't know where these people claim that folks aren't getting locked up, I guess, in their world, because they don't know anybody who is.
Basically, the war on drugs becoming the new Jim Crow in the United States.
We now have more than 2 million people in prison, more than 5 million people under criminal justice supervision on any given day in our country, and about a quarter of them are there for nonviolent drug offenses, and the overwhelming majority of them are people of color.
Well, that mass incarceration is a myth to a large degree. I also have a law practice and I do criminal defense work. One of the things that the people who want to legalize drugs say is that people who use small amounts of marijuana are going to prison. It's absolutely untrue. I've represented thousands of people. I've never known anybody to go to prison for a small amount of marijuana. People that are going to prison for drugs are drug traffickers. The average amount of marijuana that somebody gets put in prison for in the United States in federal prison is 115 pounds. Now certainly that's not personal use, that's somebody that's trafficking in drugs. Personal users who have small amounts of drugs for personal use are not going to prison. That's just absolutely untrue.
The claim has certainly been made by some, particularly those who, in the federal government, the Office of National Drug Control Policy and so forth, who make the claim that there's no major problem with incarceration rates of drug users in the United States, that it's only major, large-scale traffickers that are incarcerated. Just a simple look at the numbers shows that there's absolutely no way that that can be true. In the United States today, we have over 500,000 people incarcerated on drug offenses. There's simply no way that there are 500,000 large-scale traffickers in the United States. We're a big country. We're not that big.
There have been so many reports, most recently 2 excellent reports by Human Rights Watch and the Sentencing Project that very carefully document the dramatic increase in incarceration for drug offenses in the United States. We now have more than 2 million people in prison, more than 5 million people under criminal justice supervision on any given day in our country, and about a quarter of them are there for nonviolent drug offenses, and the overwhelming majority of them are people of color. So I don't know where these people claim that folks aren't getting locked up, I guess, in their world, because they don't know anybody who is. It must not be happening. But I know a lot of people who do, and a lot of the folks I work with do too.
In the U.S., we have what we call a 100-to-1 sentencing disparity between powder cocaine and crack cocaine, where it takes 500 grams of powder cocaine to automatically trigger a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence. Yet it only takes 5 grams of crack cocaine, possession of 5 grams, to trigger that same 10-year mandatory minimum sentence. And most states have adopted that same law that the federal government first enacted in 1986, I believe it was. That has led to widespread, massive incarceration of crack cocaine users, not dealers, because somebody possessing 5 grams of crack, they're not a dealer. If any, maybe they're selling very small amounts to support their habit. They're certainly not drug dealers in the classic sense of the word. The vast majority of them are absolutely drug users, and that's become a very large percentage of our prison population. Basically, the war on drugs becoming the new Jim Crow in the United States. Right now, as I mentioned, we have about 500,000 people incarcerated on drug offenses. Of those, about 70% are African American, and if you include Latinos, we're looking at over 90% of people convicted of drug offense, or people incarcerated on drug offenses in the United States, are people of color.
A lot of what people decry as the absence of men in the community is a direct result of the over-incarceration policies driven by the war on drugs. The inability of the high unemployment rate is also directly related to that, because once people have a drug conviction, it's hard for them to get a job. The inability of men to provide adequate support for their children is also directly related to that. The breakup of families, a lot of what people refer to as the sort of pathologies of poor communities is in a lot of ways linked to the war on drugs and the way that it's been conducted and enforced in communities of color.